Our speaker today is Mr. Jake Enriquez. Jake is a district manager in the San Diego County Department of Parks and Recreation. He's been a district manager here since 2002. He's also joined by Mr. Nick Sloan, a supervising park ranger for the San Diego County Department of Parks and Rec. I can't say enough about that department and the job that they do in preserving open space and historic sites and greenery in our county for all of our benefits. And I can personally vouch for having hiked through a number of these parks, including the one that Jake is going to tell us about today, Wilderness. And I hope that you enjoy it as much as I do and continue to do and appreciate the open space in our county. So please welcome Mr. Jake Enriquez. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent, very much. Peggy, thank you, and everybody in the Society for welcoming us today. It's a pleasure to speak here at the Rancho Bernardo Historical Society. We've been little friends of yours for many decades, and it's always good to come back. I've been in the audience for a number of talks, and the Society does a fantastic job, and we're grateful for the opportunity to share a little bit of history on the county's oldest open space preserve. As Vincent said, we're with the County of San Diego Department of Parks and Recreation. In San Diego County, there's a lot of different agencies offering parks and recreations. The cities, the state of California, the federal government, the National Park Service. There's a wide variety of agencies out there. We are your local county government. One of the parks we're going to talk about today is Wilderness Gardens Preserve. Preserve gives you an indication that resources are being protected there. It is not only a place and a refuge for wildlife and sensitive species, it also has a very rich cultural and historic background, which we're going to share with you today. And I was a park ranger for 12 or 13 years before getting into parks management. So I give talks, I don't give lectures. I'm not an academic, I'm not a biologist, I'm not an archaeologist or an anthropologist. In Parks and Recreation, when you come up through the ranger ranks, you might have specialties, but really you're a professional generalist. You're supposed to know a little bit about everything, and you're supposed to be able to be prepared to share any one of your facilities with the public and be fairly informed about it. So everything I'm going to share with you today has come from specialists. Our department has had 3 wonderful historians and researchers. Mary Ward, some in the group may know Mary Ward or see her name around. The Congress of History has a Mary Ward Award. Lynn Christensen, much of the information I'm going to share with you today came from Dr. Lynn Christensen, who was our county historian for several years. And then most recently I worked with Ellen Sweet. Some of you may know Ellen Sweet. She is a researcher for our department. She couldn't be here today, but she manages our history center, and between basically what I'm doing is taking the work and knowledge of these 3 ladies and packaged it to present it for the public today. The Wilderness Gardens County Preserve. Where is it? You all passed out the brochure so that you would have that. It's out there in Wilderness Gardens, Paula, just a little east of the Paula Mission. Everybody know where that is? Yeah? Casino, Sideways, yeah. Okay, it was established in 1973, so that's when the county's involvement starts. But we're going to try to tell you as much of the whole picture that we know about the land. It's currently open Thursdays through Tuesdays. That's a very governmental way of saying it's closed on Wednesdays. That's what we're really trying to say. Okay. Wednesday's a rest day. The rangers need one day to just take care of the preserve. That's when they can do the work and not inconvenience the public. It's also a good day for Mother Nature to have a whole place to herself and let the rangers do their stewardship. It is closed the month of August. We do close a couple of preserves due to extreme heat. This is one of them. The preserve is astride the San Luis Rey River, but down in this valley it gets very, very hot. What we've observed over the years is very low attendance in August. So what we do is we close. The cost savings of that we use to put our stewardship into other properties that work group manages. There is a $3 per vehicle charge. So it's fair to tell anybody that before they drive out there. I don't want anybody to get out there and say, Jake didn't tell me it was going to cost $3. But here's the good news, art students. The county does not charge this fee for anybody who is a senior citizen or in their senior years, mature adult as they say now. We don't check driver's license. If somebody says, hey, it's okay, we're good, right? But it helps us offset. So this is the general location of the preserve. I pulled this map down as far as I could so that I could just show a little bit south of Hodges, and that brings you to your community, Rancho Bernardo. A few minutes ago, somebody asked me, how long does it take to get there? How far away is Wilderness Gardens Preserve? If you take the 15 to the 76, it's a little under 20 miles, give or take, and probably take you 45 minutes to get there. So it's not too far. It's a beautiful drive, and the scenery is, you start to go up in elevation and sneak up towards Palomar Mountain, and it's just a beautiful part of San Diego County. There is an aerial of the preserve today. You get a sense that most of it, I have a pointer here, most of it is habitat in its natural state. And that really is the intent. That's why it was set aside in 1973, to preserve this wonderful habitat. This blue line right here represents the San Luis Rey River. So the San Luis Rey River goes right through the preserve. You'll notice this little area here where it looks like man's hand has touched the ground. And we'll talk quite a bit about that. This is an area where there's structures and a historic site. You can see that the area's got a lot of agricultural around it, and this is the Highway 76. And we'll take a look at who some of our neighbors are. This map shows the same map, this funny shape right here. You can see that we are mostly surrounded by tribal lands. So our neighbors are the Native Americans. So the most early habitation here in this area were the Native people. The reservation was established many years later, but this is their ancestral ground, this is their ancestral range and their cultural landscape. Other conserved lands are to the east of us, and then this is Riverside County. The preserve, our preserves, our county preserves and many other governmental agency preserves are often counted towards what we call multiple species conservation programs, or the MSCP. I don't want to get too bureaucratic, but the purpose of the MSCP is a local program to preserve San Diego County's native habitats, cultural landscapes, and wildlife for future generations. The goal of the county's MSCP is to conserve at least 100,000 acres of county parkland. All the natural and cultural resources in the preserve are protected. One of the wonderful things about Wilderness Gardens is a county park ranger work group is stationed there. So they show up there every day. And it is one of the most protected pieces of property we have. Biological communities, this is kind of boring stuff, but it gives you an idea. You have the river there, so you have the riparian area, and it's the river corridor, and that corridor attracts those types of animals and plant species. The river is a great source of water. There's also some ponds on the property. So Wilderness Gardens has a fair amount of wildlife present. It also has the different biological communities through the preserves, including coastal sage scrub, oak woodland, grasslands, southern riparian forest, mule fat scrub, and all these different communities help make the preserve very unique. You can move from one habitat to another as you explore on the trails and make your way through the preserve. The main historic periods of this area are very similar to most of San Diego County. You have your prehistoric period where the native people, pre-contact, before exposure to Europeans. In the preserve are milling features, grinding stones, evidence that the Native Americans did stop and pass through there. As you probably well know, the Native Americans had a tendency to move east and west up and down the corridors, the river corridors with the seasons. Not so much north and south. They did move north and south, but watersheds and rivers had a tendency to be delineations between one tribe and the other, one group of people and the other. In this area, San Luis Rey, the Indians there today, the Native Americans there today, are called Luiseño. That is what Europeans named them. They have their own names and their own language. But that's the prehistoric period does go back several thousand years in Wilderness Gardens Preserve. And if you hike the preserve today, you can pass right by the milling features and see evidence of The historic period is post-European contact. It starts in 1769 when the Spaniards arrived in San Diego, and there's a fair amount of mission history and influence on the property today. Then there's the Pioneer era. It starts out with statehood. Pioneer era could also dip back into the Mexican era because they were pioneers in their own right. Then there's the 20th century and the history as the county preserve, and then the present day. So the Spanish era, you have this whole area be under the influence of Mission San Diego. And of course, the further you got away from the mission, that influence would wane. But this area was still within the influence of Mission San Diego. The next mission to be established close by was Mission San Juan Capistrano in 1776. Now, meanwhile, the Americans are having their revolution, right, fighting the British. What was going on over here, as you probably well know, is that the Spanish were trying to get a very strong foothold in California. Well, 22 years go by before they build the Mission San Luis Rey, which is just a massive mission. How many people have visited at least 5 missions? That's pretty good. We're going to keep going. How about 10? All right, and that came up really quick. How about a dozen? Who's visited a dozen missions, you think? How about 15? How about 30? No, wait a minute, there's only 21. Trick question. How many people have visited all of them? Raise your hand. All right, so have I. It took me 10 years to do, and I'm so glad I did it. Good for all of you. They're wonderful places. Some of them are reconstructions. We know that, but don't tell me. They're wonderful.
Yeah, they all built on earthquake faults.
Yes, many of them are, and there's earthquake faults running right through this San Luis River corridor. So the greatest influence in the area was the building of the Mission San Luis Rey. It's pretty well documented that the large timbers came from Palomar Mountain to build the Mission San Luis Rey. They would have harvested those timbers and brought them right down through this river corridor, passing right through what today is Wilderness Gardens. Then, because so many resources were to the to the east of the Mission San Luis Rey, including labor resources, they established what we call today the Paula Mission in 1816. So this is very close to the end of the mission era. They started and established what they called an asistencia, or a satellite mission, and that's the Paula Mission. This area, the preserve, what is the preserve today, came under the control of the Paula Mission. They grazed their animals through here. They moved up and down the river corridor to harvest resources for the mission. The people transportation corridors were astride the Mission San Luis Rey. So the Paula Mission is a part of the history of Wilderness Gardens. So in 1821, Mexico gains independence. Many, many, many county parks are on old Mexican land grants. Some of our county park boundaries have the same exact boundary lines as many of the Mexican land grants, or the ranches. But what we have here, Wilderness Gardens, is just right here to the east of Paula. So it's just outside of Rancho Palma, and it's east of Rancho Montserrat. So it wasn't on one of the land grants boundaries, but back then, when there was no fences and ranchers just grazed their livestock wherever they wanted, they moved in and around through the Paula area, including what is the preserve today. Then the Sickler family comes. Now we're going to kind of jump. So California becomes the 31st state in 1850. For the first several years, many of the focus is establishing the cities, establishing governments, and then, of course, the gold rush in North California brings in a large influx of people to California. But it's fairly well documented that San Diego County stayed much like Mexico for several decades. In the 1880s, there's a land boom, and a lot of people come in to San Diego County. My understanding is during this period, we saw a population jump from 4,000 people to almost 20,000 people within the space of a couple of years. So here come a lot of folks from back east. These people have skills, they're educated, they learn trades from their family and their family businesses. And we don't see a whole lot of activity on what is the preserve today until the Sickler family shows up. So I'm going to talk about the Sickler brothers, and they're the ones who established one of the large historic sites within the preserve. What is documented is that in 1881, a gentleman by the name of Joseph K. Henderson deeds the property to the Sickler brothers. There were two brothers, Marion M. Sickler, the older brother, and William A. Sickler, the younger brother. The Sickler family arrives in San Diego County about 1868. They surveyed local roads, purchased lands, started business ventures. W.A. Sickler became a teacher. That was really his, probably his passion, his interest, because he starts off in teaching, goes into a milling operation, and within a short time goes back into education. There's a third brother, Arthur B. Sickler. There's not a whole lot of records on him. And I have brothers like that. Sickler Brothers Mill, also called the Paula Mill, oftentimes referred to as the Paula Mill by locals and in the newspapers. In 1880, the union says that M. Sickler would be leaving the Signal Corps service to join his brother in Paula. Nice to have your personal affairs aired out in the local newspaper. That same article says his brother, W.A. Sickler, is going to Paula after attending the San Diego Teachers Institute. So he's finished getting his education to be a teacher and decides he and his brother are going to go out to Paula, which is like going out to the middle of nowhere, and the intent is to build a flour mill. The mill. Their plan was the mill would be water powered, it would be an undershot grist mill design, it would be astride the San Luis Rey. The San Luis Rey River would be the water source. Keep in mind at this time, this is long before Lake Henshaw's been built. So the San Luis Rey River ran with its most authority at this time. When the snow dries, if there's a heavy winter and there's a lot of snow on Palomar Mountain, the San Luis Rey River at that time would run until the snow melted. And it would run well into the spring and into the summer. We still see some of that today, but not, the watershed has been shrunk by Lake Henshaw. A rock channel and flume would drop water onto the wheel, and their budget and their cost was going to be $5,000. A lot of money for that time. At this time, there was only one other mill in operation in what is today San Diego County. It was called the Los Coches Mill, and that's over in Lakeside. So these brothers saw this opportunity. There was a mill down there, and all the farmers in those communities were using that. The farmers up here didn't have that same option. So the Sickler brothers were thinking, we'll build something everybody needs, and this will be our business venture. 1881, they had a really good year. The union reports stated that the Sickler brothers were at work on their flour mill. The following month, the union notes that the entire outfit for a flour mill was waiting for pickup by the Sicklers at the wharf. The entire outfit appears to be first class, and there is no reason why the Sickler brothers should not make a good flour, make as good flour as mills in the States. The mill opened for business in November of 1881.
What did they mill?
Wheat, corn.
The group here?
Mm-hmm. This is a sketch, an artist's sketch of his interpretation of the mill. We'll see some real pictures of it, but some of the elements of the mill here are accurate. This is the rock channel. This is the flume bringing the water down, presumably shooting it onto the wheel that turned the stones. So they opened in November. By December, the union has reported that the mill has all the work it can handle, turning out 12 barrels of flour a day. Wheat, corn, barley fine, barley coarse. By February of the following year, the mill was declared a success, and the Sickler brothers were doing pretty good. So even though they did very good, this is a real picture of the mill. This is a picture of the mill in 1901. As far as we know, the earliest picture of the mill. But W.A. Sickler, he's the one who was into education. He returns to education, and he goes to the new founded town in Escondido, which was about to incorporate 6 years later in 1888. growing population, growing school system. He goes back into education and ultimately becomes a superintendent of Escondido schools. By 1885, another operator is running the mill. Marion Sickler is still involved, but he's pretty much turned it over to foreman at this time. And he is the owner, and he is assigned an operator. By 1889, Sickler returns to San Diego, where he lives the rest of his life, and he goes into the Postal Service. Again, you see these guys who had trades, they had skills, but as the population grows in San Diego County, they go back and take steady jobs. By the 1990s, the mill is no longer in operation. And in this picture in 1901, it's just there non-operation. Some interesting elements about the mill. I'm sorry, did somebody say something?
Is that 1890s?
Oh, excuse me. 1901.
No, the one above it.
Oh, that should be 1890. Thank you very much. Figured. Okay, thank you very much for that. Some interesting components. A lot of lumber there. And the other thing is noteworthy is a lot of glass. That's a lot of windows. Now, grist mills across will have, it's not uncommon for them to have windows. You have to have light inside and ventilation. But it's clear that the Sickler brothers didn't spare any expense. They put a lot of finished building materials into the structure. A wonderful thing about Parks and Recreation is a lot of very talented people come into our department. And we had one employee, she's now a senior park ranger. She drew up some AutoCAD elevations of the mill using historic photographs and working in partnership with our historian, Lynn Christensen, at the time. So these are wonderful to have. What you can see is that just from the wooden foundation up, the mill is almost 30 feet tall. That says 27 feet 6 inches. You add the foundation to it, and the mill itself was probably pretty close to 35 feet tall. Pretty good sized mill, not I would call it medium size across the nation, but for this area, this is a pretty substantial structure for the time. So more changes. A few years later, in 1906, the South Coast Land Company buys the property. And not much happened. There wasn't much change to the property. In a year that we haven't identified yet, a Valley Center resident by the name of Peggy McNally purchased the lumber from the mill to build a home in Valley Center. You notice the whole structure's gone now. So she reuses this. It was very common at the time to recycle building materials. The Sickler brothers had already gone through the trouble of harvesting the wood from Palomar Mountain, getting it down here, cutting it into beams, and using them as weight-bearing building materials. Why do all of that again? Just go buy this lumber right here. The McNallys became a pretty prominent family in Valley Center. They were in agriculture. And if you travel Coal Grade Road today from Valley Center down into Palma Valley, there is a cross street there called McNally Road. And you take it for a while and there's gates and other gates, but somewhere back there is presumably this home with this lumber. I've never seen it. It's private property. The property changed hands many times again. In the 1930s, a family by the name of Long from Los Angeles purchased the property. They built a hunting lodge, which is today the ranger station. So they built the first, they built the first modern building. It is a brick and mortar building, and it was really intended to be a hunting lodge because kind of the way the windows are set up, they're almost hunting blinds, like you could hunt from the lodge itself with deer passing by. Since then, different rooms have been scabbed on to the exterior of the building, and it has a different floor plan and configuration today. But the original structure that the Long family built is there today. And during this time, the mill site was neglected so much that in 1958, they found it. At this time there was a fella involved who was entrepreneur and a self-marketer. His name is Manchester Bodie. He's coming up right now. But I don't think it was so much that anything was found. I think maybe they came up with a good eye-catching headline. But here you can see some of the pipes still laying around that manipulated the water, and of course the stones. A couple of interesting things about the components. So the wood came from Palomar. The mill kit came from San Francisco. The stones were recycled from Missouri. The Sickler brothers, there was a mill out there that was no longer in use, and the Sickler brothers identified them and had them brought out. They had family that were in the mill business back in Missouri. So the stones themselves were reused again here at Pollock. So now enters Manchester Bodie. Anybody ever heard of Manchester Bodie? No? Anybody ever heard of a place in Los Angeles called Descanso Gardens?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Anybody want to share something about Descanso Gardens? Cost too much to get in? Thoughts, observations? When were you there? Who said yes? Long time ago? Were you there last year?
No, before I came to San Diego, before 2008.
Okay. Well, Descanso Gardens is sort of the big sister, big brother to Wilderness Gardens. Manchester Bodie was a newspaper publisher and a businessman. He had political aspirations. He ran for the Senate. He founded Descanso Gardens in what is today La Cañada. They call it La Cañada Flint Ridge today, but back then it was just La Cañada. It's a wonderful place. Nick and I have both been to it. It's the combination of a natural landscape with added rock bridges and pathways and ornamental plants from all over, all kinds of varieties. So it's a very colorful place, very pretty, very shady and very lush and green. It's a garden, and descanso in Spanish means break or relaxation. Descanso, it's like relaxation gardens. So that was Manchester Bodie's vision, and he very much groomed Descanso Gardens. If you go there, you can definitely see the hand of man there. So he purchases this land that is now Wilderness Gardens Preserve in 1854. And it is Manchester Bodie who takes the inspiration from Descanso Gardens and calls this property Wilderness Gardens. And that's his son.
Is there a Descanso community in San Diego County?
There is a Descanso, I think, off I-8, where 8 turns to 80. I have to look at a map, but there is a Descanso in San Diego. Okay, a little bit more on Bodie. This is him getting off a steamship in England in 1934. He was a man of means and business, very savvy gentleman. But he also had a penchant for horticulture. He loved plants and trees. He loved beautifying the land. At Wilderness Gardens, he made the ponds. If you go today, there's one pond still there. He made multiple ponds. The others, the river has reclaimed the others. He put in rock walls, rock gates, water conveyances, rock-lined water conveyances. Some of it is very obvious, more towards the front of the preserve, but as you get further into the preserve, you'd have to look a little farther. But anywhere you see rock mortared together at Wilderness Gardens, that was Manchester Bodie. At Wilderness Gardens, he wanted to keep the oak trees. He wanted to use the oaks as an anchor. And underneath oak trees, it's very acidic. Now, oak trees have a lot of acid in them. So he started planting acid-loving and shade-loving plants, camellias, azaleas, all kinds of different varieties. And so you had this combination. Manchester Bodie's Wilderness Gardens was a combination of oak woodlands, beautified with all these different colors of blooming azaleas and camellias. It was probably a very unique place to visit. And the ponds, and the waterfowl in the ponds, and his rock bridges and causeways are very beautiful. He also introduced some other plants that, biologists today would say, probably not the best plants to introduce, but he introduced oleanders, which have a lot of color, There's one or two oleanders still present in the preserve today. A few eucalyptus trees. There's still some eucalyptus trees. He planted them as a windbreak, often used as windbreaks, but provide a fair amount of shade as well. In 1850, Manchester Bodie ran for U.S. Senate, and I think at different times he was both a Republican and Democrat, depending on who he was going up against and what he thought his chances were to win. So he was kind of an interesting guy. But by the time he gets out to Wilderness Gardens in 1850 and going into the 60s, he's sort of winding down and he's spending more time on his interests. While out at Paula, he was living out there while he was improving the grounds. And he started a little local newspaper called The Leaves, which he published and printed in the barn at Wilderness Gardens, and the barn is still standing today. And in each edition of The Leaves, this is the above the fold of what page 1 would look like, was a story or reflection or something of interest about his new wilderness garden. So he was promoting it locally. My wife's grandmother told me that as late as the 60s, you could drive out there and just pull in, take pond plants or aquatic plants or help yourself to a cutting or take a little azalea or camellia on the way out. You just left your money and put a rock over it, and it was sort of an honor system. She died about 10 years ago, but I asked her about it many, many times, and she said, for sure, without a doubt, that's the property. We didn't call it Wilderness Gardens. She remembers Manchester Bodie, but I thought that was a very interesting story, that he would allow people to do that. So he was a man of the people, and he was building this thing not to be an empire or an oasis for him, but he wanted to share it with the public. At the same time, he hung on to Descanso Gardens, and these are a few images of Descanso Gardens. This isn't a publication. Up here, he is entertaining some royalty. I think he has Prince Bernard and Queen Juliana here in the back seat of his car. Here's one of his rock walls at Descanso Gardens. This is the Bodie House, or the garden house at Descanso Gardens, which I believe you can go into today, and they have art exhibits in there. And this is him at the window at his desk writing, and I'm sure it's a staged photograph, but to give you an idea of the man, beautifying the property with building structures and gardens, all to share with folks while still pursuing his interests. Kind of a unique guy. At Wilderness, these are some of the earliest photographs we have of the different plants he planted. It's hard to tell the exact color or species. These are all black and white. He had peacocks in the property. This peacock is taking one of the pipes that he's using to maneuver water around the property from the river into the ponds and using it as a perch, giving still a pretty nice pose. But we're fortunate to have some of these pictures. The ponds are small, but they're really nice, and today they are a watering option. They're a drinking option for the local wildlife, and Nick can attest that that's where he sees a lot of the wildlife is going to be in and around the pond. Nick, you want to give a few words on the mountain lion population at Wilderness Gardens?
Sure. Yeah. I will just follow up with what Jake was saying about the pond there. That is what I think I have the coolest wildlife sighting. I saw a bobcat during the day, which is unusual in itself, but it was drinking right out of the pond. So that was probably one of the better wildlife sightings I've seen. But as far as the mountain lion population, it's definitely a good corridor for mountain lions. They don't have a specific place. They have a range of 200 plus miles where they roam. So, it's not like they just stay in one place and that's where they stay. An interesting thing that happened is we had somebody from UC Davis, a biologist named Winston Vickers, and he came and set up some wildlife cameras, and he would put some deer meat in front of the wildlife cameras to see if they could attract some mountain lions, and sure enough, they did, and we got some great pictures of a mom and its cubs, and again, at various times. Sometimes he wouldn't obtain the picture because, of course, the mountain lions are roaming through, going through different areas. but he did obtain some wonderful pictures of some mountain lions and their cubs, so that was really great to see. So when people ask, do you have mountain lions there? I can definitively say yes. Never seen one there. Most people ask out of a little bit of fear or trepidation. But speaking of wildlife, one other thing I'd like to say is that the county setting aside and preserving land is such a valuable experience to provide the wildlife corridor. It's something I noticed, and this is just anecdotal, and I'm sorry I don't have any research on it or anything for sure, but when I first came to Wilderness Gardens and was working there, I never would really see a coyote or anything during the day. It was very unusual, never would. And right after they started widening Highway 76, when you were going west toward Bonsall, and started disturbing a lot of land there, a lot of coyotes seem to have used that corridor, and now it's very unusual at Wilderness Gardens if I don't see a coyote at least once a day, oftentimes more. So it's really a cool thing when you can see the benefit of it, and you're there on the ground. You can see, wow, it really does make a difference. So I actually see more coyote in the preserve than I did when I first started. So that's really great. Got a question?
I was just wondering, how recent was that lion sighting?
Winston Vickers, Jake could correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I believe he was out there about 6-7 years ago.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those have been a while.
Yeah, and again, it was via wildlife camera.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
But still,
So you have no resident population of mountain lions?
No. In fact, from UC Davis, Winston Vicker and his team, what they would do is they would put the GPS collar on the mountain lions and track from like wilderness where they go. And so I was fortunate enough to see a map of their range, and it's very fascinating. They go all the way up toward Palomar Mountain and all around. The females have a little bit narrower range than the males, but it was pretty amazing. And they would go on the west side of the 15 and come back through wilderness, and they go pretty far up to the north. So it really did. It really great evidence of how important it is as a wildlife corridor.
On one of your pictures, or one of the early pictures, you also showed raptor. So I don't know if it's golden eagle or what. So you have resident populations of those?
Yeah, there's a lot of raptors at Wilderness Gardens. That particular picture was the red-tailed hawk. Got the red shoulder hawk, barn owls, great horned owls. There's a pretty strong population of bald eagles at Lake Henshaw, and they do soar down this way. Golden eagles too, coming out of Ramona, and you can go to Lake Wolford and East Escondido at certain times of the year. As a matter of fact, this time of the year, and see bald eagles pulling fish out of the lake. A lot of times people think it's not happening or they're gone or whatever. And the things they told us in high school growing up, you'll never see one again. They have made a strong recovery. So these animals, coyotes, they're in the news recently, mountain lions. It is not a crime to be a mountain lion or a coyote. The best thing you can do when exploring the wilderness and going outdoors is use the buddy system. Go with others. These animals, they don't want to have anything to do with us. They really don't. And during the day, what Nick's telling you is during the day, it's lower probability. He starts there at the crack of dawn. He stays until after sundown during the winter. So he's seen them at different times of the day. But I never give a talk about Wilderness Gardens or even El Ho Canyon without leaving some of our mountain lion brochures. There's good things in there about your behavior, things about their behavior and how to go to the wilderness where these animals are present. And it's just common sense. Make your presence known. Don't cause a ruckus, but if you do see one, consider yourself very fortunate. It'll only last for a couple of seconds, and then they're going to take off and go on their way. Even a bobcat is a fortunate sighting. So this was a wonderful piece of property. So Manchester Bodie, he passes away in 1967. And I'm sure it took a couple of years to settle his estate and get all his affairs sorted out and whatnot. So by the time the early 70s roll around, the property is targeted for development. And that got a lot of locals very concerned. Keep in mind, in the 70s is when the Earth Day movement started. You had a lot of social change, social policy. Generations had seen what we have done to Mother Earth and what we've done in the United States, and citizens were of the mind of starting to set aside wild areas, natural areas.
the Laguna fire.
And Laguna fire was a big fire too, and that was a very catastrophic event for San Diego County. In 1972, a citizens group called SWAP, Small Wilderness Area Preserve, was formed. This is a group of citizens who proposed to local governments, county, state, and other parks departments, hey, don't let them develop this wonderful piece of the river. Let's preserve it. Well, the thing about government is they're always doing 5-year plans. And it's very hard to immediately react to something if somebody didn't suggest it 5 years ago, so that the money and the resources could be set aside. Well, the citizens said, hey, you know what? Okay, fine, government, we've let you know what our intentions are. We're going to start raising money. And we're going to try to raise enough money to buy the land that is targeted for development. It was about 590 acres. They did a very good job. They had just come off the success of saving the Los Osos Oak Preserve in, I believe it's Los Angeles County, very north Los Angeles County. What's after Los Angeles County? Ventura? It's up there. And they saved it. It was only 72-acre piece of property, small as far as by preserve standards, but this group was feeling very empowered about that. Beautiful place today. It is a state park, Los Osos Oaks State Park. So this group, their very next target or their very next project was to save Wilderness Gardens, and they kept the name and they adopted the name. Well, they were very successful, and as they raised money and as the amount of money raised went up, they wrote the County Board of Supervisors and they wrote the Director of Parks and Rec saying, here's where we're at, here's where we're at. And they lobbied Sacramento. The state park system gives grants to smaller agencies like the county for land acquisition. And ultimately, between the money that SWAP and those citizens raised and a state grant, the money was raised to purchase the first 590 acres of Wilderness Gardens. So Wilderness Gardens Preserve is born in 1973. Well, SWAP wasn't done. They went on to their next project, and anybody who had a contribution to the money to raise Wilderness Gardens got one of these nice posters sent to them. And if you have a microscope, way down here at the bottom, it says Wilderness Gardens, San Diego County, SWAP. And it gives their P.O. box. They were based out of La Jolla. So everybody got one of these. Nick, you found these in the barn, like what, a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I did.
And we're fortunate to have them. If anybody likes that image, catch me or Nick after the talk. So Wilderness Gardens was championed out. Now York County Parks Department had its very first open space preserve. Prior to that, we had regional parks. There were picnic parks. There were places where people went dancing, or the outdoor dances, or you had birthday parties or family reunions, or a very big thing at the time was outdoor company picnics. The military also bivouacked at places like El Monte Park, Felicita Park, Live Oak Park, and that was the county park system. Now we had our very own first open space preserve. So the preserve was open to the public. During the 80s, it had to be closed a couple of times for budget cuts, but it has been open pretty steadily since I've been with the department, and it has got that little special designation of being the first. So we try to give Wilderness Gardens as much attention as possible. So if you go to the park today, this is what you will see. This is the Wilderness Gardens gate. Now today there's a group called the Friends of Wilderness Gardens. They're a 501(c) nonprofit. They help us achieve some of the goals. And sometimes the county can't purchase a certain thing or react to a certain need. Our Friends group jumps in and they help us. It's very typical of a park model, is to have the government running it and then your nonprofit Friends group that augments them. So this is Wilderness Gardens Preserve. Prettiest gate we have in our whole department. So this rock work right here, hey, look, a deer! Oh, that's so this rock work right there goes back to Manchester Bodie's work. These are the pillars he put. So you go down this driveway, come to the wilderness, beautiful wilderness staging area. Now, this picture is pretty accurate in the sense that if you go early or you go during the week, you largely have the place to yourself. So if you're looking for a little solitude or tranquility, if you've visited the Daily Ranch, or you go to some of these parks that are just so busy and they're loved to death, I even think twice about even going to Balboa Park sometimes, or going to Torrey Pines at certain days or time of the year. There's just so many people there. If you go at the right time in Wilderness Gardens with your buddy and your friends, you'll have a wonderful experience. You'll have a whole
dogs
list.
allowed? Dogs?
Dogs are allowed. Now the next thing you'll do is you will cross the San Luis Rey River. Here it is. You think you can make it? That's the San Luis Rey River. Nick, is this what it looks like today?
Yes,
You went right through here this morning,
I
didn't
did.
you? Yep.
exactly like that.
Okay. Water's running down from Palomar. Oh, I can use this. Water's running down from Palomar, comes right through here, and is heading towards the Pacific Ocean. This is where you will start your hike. You will cross the San Luis Rey River. Wild experience. Go up there, have a hike, tell your friends and neighbors later on in the day, I crossed the San Luis Rey River and I didn't even get my feet wet. There are times when we can't open the preserve because Mother Nature says, hey, you see this buttress right here? Those are foot increments. There's that same buttress. The picture's taken from a slightly different angle because that's as close as the photographer could get. I think it was you. This is your picture.
Yeah.
That's the San Luis Rey River. That's when Palomar Mountain and the rest of the watershed is done catching and absorbing water, and Mother Nature says, here I come. The river can stay like this for days and weeks at a time. Sometimes we don't know. Check the website or call. But in times when you can carry on, you will go a short distance and you'll come across this boulder right here. And on this boulder is a plaque. Now in Parks and Recreation, we have to be careful about attribution because a lot of folks want to say, oh, I did something, I want my name, and that's fine. That's okay. This plaque in particular is very appropriate and commemorates that citizen committee and what they did. They are really one of the parents of Wilderness Gardens Preserve. Without that energy, without those citizens saying, we're going to raise money, we're going to bring this along, it wouldn't have happened. So it's there today, it's a wonderful thing. If you get a minute, stop by and read the plaque. It's short and sweet, no names, no attributions. It just says, here's who we were and here's what we did. You continue a little farther on, you're going to come to the ranger station. This is Nick Sloan's office. Pretty good deal, huh? Yeah. The public is welcome at the ranger station. We have Nick, 2 other rangers, and 3 park attendants that work out of there. It's a very good team. They're responsible for over 6,000 acres. As you approach the building, you will see the remnants of the milling stone from the Sickler Mill. Repurposed, reused from a previous mill in Missouri. If you go inside, you'll find the Preserve Museum with a lot of help from the Friends of Wilderness Gardens. The Friends bought the county that nice gate out front. And the Friends said, hey, we want to do something else. We really want to recreate and recapture the history of the Sickler Brothers Mill at Apollo Mill. They had a local artist create this display. Its proportions are accurate, using the historic photos and all the research we provided to them. Nice description, and this is all free to the public. You can just come on in and enjoy all of this. The artist added a really nice feature to put a little electrical motor right here in the wheel. So when you flip the switch, a light comes on in the mill. Nick, is that right?
Yeah, it does.
And the wheel turns.
Yeah.
Very nice, very nice.
Do the Sicklers and the Bodies have any descendants in the area who come out there? Or?
We've heard from Sickler descendants from time to time. Sometimes they just pull in. When this was brought to the park and dedicated, Sickler descendants came out. So yeah, they're still out there. Not many of them have the last name Sickler anymore, but through marriage the names have changed, but they're descendants. And they were there when this was dedicated.
Just something interesting, if Jake don't mind if I add about the mill. I think you guys will think this is amusing. I kind of do, but this speaks to inflation. So the original mill cost $5,000. The model cost $5,000. So that's what that was about 10 years ago. So that's what 5,000 gets.
Very good point. Very good point. Made by one artist in Valley Center. You make everything you see. If you continue on a little further, you will actually come to the real mill site. You can go right up to the mill site today. There's a nice kiosk there with a panel that has a lot of the images I've shared with you today and a lot of the information, plus more. But you can go right up to it. And this is the mill site today. It doesn't look terribly different from that picture in 1958 from the mill found article. The county has kept it in a state of arrest. It is shared with the public. You can go up and look at it. The wheel is still there in its original spot, has not been moved. Closer examine of the wheel over time, it was vandalized. You can see where, not during the county park era, but before, that some of the paddles are missing. And this was an improved paddle. These guys bought the Lexus version of the wheel. These paddles being cupped take less water to make the wheel revolve. At the right optimal down spout of water, this wheel could go 200 to 300 revolutions a minute. So this thing was moving, spinning the stones. Today, Wilderness Gardens Preserve, it's open. There's the trail map. We would love to have any group, organized group, if you are involved in other service groups, clubs, or just groups of families and friends. You have the brochure. Check out our website. We want to share the preserve with the public. It is the county's first open space preserve. All other preserved lands, this is the cornerstone for it. I hope you've enjoyed the talk. If anybody has any questions, I can take those now. Comments? Yes.
Is it flat or is it hilly or lots of rocks or what?
It's very flat.
Oh, good.
It is a moderate height. That's a very good question. You can see the topography lines are very dense right here. This is an elevation. So you see where the dotted lines are? The trails aren't on those elevations. If I could go back a few slides, a lot of the trail are gonna look like this picture I've got right here. Everything's pretty flat. It's very moderate. Plenty of shade along the way. You can stop at the ranger station. Nick is great about hosting people and giving them a bottle of water. A lot of the trail looks like this. It's flat, it's wide, there's a ranger presence there. It is a very, very safe preserve.
And
Yeah, Nick.
go ahead, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to say, and to speak to that, I'd love to have any of you out. I do a scheduled talk on the first and third Saturday of the month at 9 a.m. So I'd love to have you guys out if you want to just do a short walk. It's basically a little over half a mile from the staging to the ranger station. So what I do is I start with a group of people. We just go from the staging to the ranger station, and then from there they can proceed on and go look at the actual foundation of the grist mill. But along the way, I talk about the history of the preserve, answer questions anybody might have. So I'd love to invite you for that.
That'd be great to have you out. Yeah. Okay. Comment. Rich?
Any archaeological digs or anything like that?
There haven't been any digs there as far as I know. The sites have been recorded though. And they are, again, down in the river bottom area. They're not so far up on the hill. They're milling sites, grinding stones, those types of things. Yes, sir.
I'm trying to reconcile your comment about the seasonal water in the river, not very much, and the water that's needed to run the mill. Does that mean the mill didn't operate for a lot of the time?
You know what it is? It's really Lake Henshaw. Lake Henshaw dams up. Lake Henshaw is east of this stretch of the river. When Lake Henshaw was dammed up, the river doesn't flow like it used to.
Okay.
It's an impaired watershed. And what they would do is take whatever flow, and it's not like they needed it to flow torrentially like it's doing in that other picture. They would funnel it down into a narrow stream to hit those paddles.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't take a lot of water, it just needed to be enough to funnel it down.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you can see, you mentioned that they use flumes, and I've seen more of that in the history of the county, that these various flume companies which were created to create wooden sort of trestles to try to channel water. And you can still, interestingly, there's parts of the county you can see like the remnants of them here and there.
Yes, yes, they're still out there.
So if you walk the trails, will you see the grinding stones of the Native Americans?
We'll go right by them.
You will.
You will get to them.
Are
even-
they marked some, so you know?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah. There's a sign there that says archaeological site.
great.
Are there Are there more trails that go into the hills?
There is one. There is one. Nick, why don't you talk about that?
Sure, yeah. You know, it used to be called the Upper Meadow Trail, but you know, we had a great chief in the past, Frank Special, and so the trail has been named the Frank Special Memorial Trail, and it does go up and provide an overlook of the preserve. So it's, if you want something more challenging, if you were to hike all the trails in Wilderness Gardens, it's 4.5 miles. So you know, it's not like it's going to take you 2 days or whatever. You know, it's 2 hours maybe. So, and then I would categorize all the trails to easy to moderate. So, yeah.
Here's that little elevation change. You see this dotted line just come up into these topography lines.
So they don't go up into the...
No, they don't. And this is like this.
Okay.
This area is very steep.
Are there any remnants of the flume? Still there?
The rock channel is there.
But
The
not-
wooden flume is all gone. It's all gone. Any other questions? Okay, we're going to do trivia for a couple of things. Let's see who's paying attention. I know we got to wrap up. Okay, you got to raise your hand. All right, there's rules. Who coined the phrase wilderness gardens? Okay, I need a hand. Okay, no, she was the first hand. Okay, you both win. And Chester Bodie, 2 winners. Okay. You get the County Parks Department's latest book, 100 Years of County Parks, and the mill site is in there. Okay, next trivia question. What does the acronym SWAP stand for? Rich?
Small Wilderness Area Preservation.
Nailed it! All right!
Preserve.
Preserve. Rich, you can have any one of these 2 books. I have 2 other books. One on the ranchos of San Diego County, because I came to Rancho Bernardo. And the other one is on historic stage routes.
You have to have
Historic stage routes.
that.
Okay. You guys tired? Want to go home and take a nap, or you want to play trivia? Okay. Is it a crime to be a mountain lion?
No.
Okay, you all win. Here's what you all win. You all can leave with a copy of the 1976 Soldiers and Pioneer book, published by your own County Board of Supervisors. This is a nice, short history of San Diego County during the Pioneer era. Please, everybody take one of those. Okay, one more question, a hard one. Well, let's see, we'll come up with a hard one here. Oh, you're right, I got one. Where did the millstones come from?
Missouri.
First, Missouri. Okay. You have your choice of historic ranchos or stage routes.
Rich, did you get the stage route?
I already got that one.
All right, I'll take the ranchos.
You want the rancho? Oh, we got a tag team going on here.
That's the
You
first
guys
one we
are
had to buy when we built the mud
cheating. You guys are cheating. No, it's okay. If you don't have to pay the $3 parking fee, you can cheat on stuff like this, right? Put it with enough, right? Okay, last question, and this one's easy, but please raise your hand because we want it to be fair. What mission had the greatest influence on this property? I saw this lady say. Mission San Luis Rey? Yes. Yes. Okay. Unless anybody has any comments, questions, I'll stay for a little while. I'd love to visit with folks. If anybody's interested in this type of image over here, if you know somebody in your circle of family and friends that might find it interesting, please let me know. But thank you again for your time, and we always wish the Rancho Bernardo Historical